And thanks for staying with us. In our first story, government is here to settle public sector workers' contribution to the Social Security and National Insurance Trust net, amounting to 4.33 billion cedis. That's according to the 2021 Auditor General's report. Here's more.
With the Controller and Accountant General's Department and the Ministry of Finance on the payments plan for defraying the outstanding debt. It therefore wants management to explain that SNET already has a payment plan with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that the outstanding debt has so far made some efforts to settle the indebtedness, citing the year 2020, in which 2 bonds totaling 1 billion cedis were received as part payment of the indebtedness. The report further noted that 10 out of 45 unlisted equity companies SNET invested in have not been paying dividend to the trust for the past 10 years. The total investment value of the 10 companies stood at 150.3 million cedis. The report therefore recommended that management should assess the operations of the companies to ascertain the reasons behind the poor performance and take strategic decisions that will safeguard the interest of the trust.
Joining us on Zoom is Executive Director of the Policy Initiative for Economic Development, Dr. Daniel Amate-Enim. There's a lot to dig in on the Auditor General's report, but first, your reaction to our lead story today, which is that government is here to settle public sector workers' contributions to SNET, amounting to 4.33 billion cedis.
Yes, it's quite unfortunate because the SNET contribution, to my mind, is very critical and key, because that is what employees will rely on when they retire. But it is a clear indication that government is indeed broke, and the situation as presented to us is even more deeper than as we see. Because as it stands now, if government is unable to settle SNET payment of public sector workers, then clearly that is to tell you that the economic situation as we find ourselves now is nothing to write home about. It is quite unfortunate, and I trust that the Ministry of Finance will expedite action to be able to augment the payment, because that is very key. It's a payment that ought to be invested for the benefit of workers when they retire, so they could, they could use it to during their retirement age. So to me, I think it is not an issue that should be taken lightly. It is not an issue that should, be written under the carpet. It should be taken seriously, and government ought to expedite action as quickly as possible to effect the payment as and when the funds are made necessary. Not even as and when. Government should facilitate the process to ensure that the payment are effected. And to me, I think that's the only way out for government to do, because it is very important, it's very critical, and it is very key to the survival of employees as and when they retire. That is what they're going to rely on, and government ought to take it as a very important exercise.
Yeah, and some of the headlines from the Auditor General's report are depressing, including the fact that total irregularities in the public sector organizations.
Hello, Daryl.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Play them again.
Yes, I was just making a point about some of the headlines we have read from the Auditor General's report being so depressing. And the top headline, the fact that total irregularities in the public sector organizations in 2021 increased 36% to 17.48 billion cedis. I just wanted you to paint a picture for us, to our audience, on how these losses are hurting the economy, which is already in a crisis.
Yes, it is just a manifestation of the kind of system we're running over the period, where we focus more on post-audit without focusing on pre-audit. Pre-audit is putting mechanisms to ensure, that is internal control mechanisms to ensure that the system works and the system becomes more effective to minimize some of these irregularities and to some larger extent financial malfeasance in the public sector. So yes, it's hurting government, it's hurting the performance of the economy. If you have so much money that is unaccounted for, investment that have been locked up in unproductive investment mechanisms or schemes, and we are not accounting for it, and then some of this money ought to be used for the betterment of the citizens. So it is just a manifestation and a reflection of the kind of weak governance system we have, and that's the reason which it appears that things are not working as expected for us over the period. So what I will recommend is for us to move away from post-audit. The post-audit is what the Auditor General has done, which is very good, but we need to focus on pre-audit, putting in place internal control mechanisms, and I think he has recommended one. That is by ensuring that we have a corporate governance system in place, by ensuring that the appointing authorities appoint people, not just appointing people, but appointing competent hands that will ensure the efficient and productive management of public sector institutions. So to me, we need to revisit our governance system. We need to visit our corporate governance system. We need to visit the overall public administration of this country by ensuring that we do things that will benefit the system, that will benefit the overall welfare of the citizens. As it stands now, I'm afraid the system is gradually losing its core, and it could be described as, so to speak, in code, as a failed system. And this is not just only peculiar to this particular administration, but I have seen it as a very endemic systemic failure that we have over the period. And we need to revisit the system. We need to realign and ensure that we put in mechanisms to ensure that some of these irregularities and financial malfeasance should become the thing of the past. If we want a very efficient governance system, if we want a better country for all of us.
And while some of these may be as a result of corruption, and as you point out, some of the cases have to do with efficiencies in managing public finances, and you talk about the Auditor General asking for more compliance. It looks like that is not enough. How can we ensure efficiency?
Yes, number one, by ensuring that we appoint the right people. We have to minimize appointment of political faithfuls. That's the first step. And then secondly, we must ensure that we apply the law to the latter. So for instance, if an institution fails to comply to lay down systems and rules, and as a result, irregularities emerge, then there's a need for sanctions to be applied. I'm of the view, respectfully, that if sanctions are applied, people will take governance and public institutions seriously, and they will do things that will ensure that they strictly comply with rules and systems as put in place by the Constitution or any other law currently in existence. So it is about compliance, it is about it's about applying the whip as and when people flout regulations and systems. So to me, if we, as a serious nation, these are some of the things that ought to be done to ensure that we have a very efficient system running for the benefit of all citizens.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel Amartey, who is Executive Director of the Policy Initiative for Economic Development. Appreciate your time with us. Now, economist Professor Ebu-Texin has underscored the need for government to invest in infrastructure development and productive sectors of the economy. According to him, that is the only long-term solution that will open up the country for economic activities. Speaking on the AM show, Professor Texin advised government to make sure the $750 million Afrexim Bank loan is used for the intended infrastructure needs.
In fact, that is what we need to do. So there's nothing wrong with it, even if our debt situations are to expand the productive capacity of the economy. In fact, that is what we need to do. So if the capital markets were available for us now, I would always support the government to go and borrow to expand the productive capacity of this economy, no matter how high our debt to GDP ratio is. Because don't forget that that ratio is the debt over the GDP. And so if we expand the productive base of the economy and GDP grows faster than the rate at which we borrow, our debt to GDP ratio will decline, our tax revenues, which is a proportion of our output, would increase, our debt in terms of our fiscal deficits will decline, and our debt will be moving on the path of what we call sustainability. So that is what we need. In fact, one of the solutions to the current situation we find ourselves is for us to benefit from such loans like the Afrexim Bank loan to go and expand the domestic capacity of our economy, attract more firms to come in, produce, employ, tax, and then expand the economy. And that is a sure way to go. I mean, if we are going to look forward at bringing our debt levels down, what we need currently is an expansion and productive capacity of the economy.
Well, next on the marketplace, the Bookbinders Association of Ghana is saying the industry risks collapse due to economic challenges if there are no proper interventions to sustain the operations. According to chairman of the association, Kwawu PAJ, government's procurement processes in acquiring books for schools across the country should be devoid of middlemen. Speaking to Joy Business, he called for government to factor the operations in the One District, One Factory initiative. Here's more in this special report.
As of today, a gram of 90 grams, that is the high bulk, is costing 690 and 850 Ghana cedis. But for the period of 3 months, it has increased over 500 Ghana cedis.
Those were the calls of the Bookbinders Association of Ghana. They are expressing concerns over high cost of operations due to the rising inflation in the country and are threatening to halt the printing of exercise books. I decided to visit one of the factories in Accra where the binding of these books are done. There I met Mr. Amuzu, who is a member of the Bookbinders Association of Ghana, for some engagement.
Right, so we are in one of the factories of book binding here in Accra. We want to know what really goes into the binding of these books for students out there. I have here the owner of the factory to speak to. But first and foremost, he will be taking me through some of the process. Where do we start from to where we end? Mr. Amuzu, we have a call here. At this time, we see a lot of issues there, but answer the Boko issues, what goes into the making or the binding of the books? See, most of the things
you got paper now, you got save, and that year, I share a bit of Kotoku, size near 30-40, Indian.
These are some of the basic components we employ to create our books. At the industrial sector, we obtain the papers from a retailer. The papers are from India and imported.
That's margin lines. Wait to me, but you use machine margin lines.
When we are done marking it, we return it to the puller machine to fold and cut the papers into desired shapes. He controls the ruling machine.
Notebook, exercise book, graph, sketch, money, that is only filled. But if textbook there, I want you filled. Now you today be as a bank, other books, sir, fan we schools. Any maybe I'm your books, no. Any maybe a books, no. Every.
What we do are notebooks, exercise books, and graph books. We do not publish textbooks. We frequently hear that government is producing books, but we are unsure of the source. The government hasn't given us any compensation. For us, things are quite difficult.
Said the that are and you be fee abiding some. A Jumani money dear. Anka paper yen to me cassa a buono and cost. But say the idea, said the air corner. And we had thing. Me one ma book way, size we are, meditate way. January, book way, January, near ton 6 cities. 6 cedis.
Previously priced at 6 cedis, this book is now 10 cedis. Currently, a full scalp notebook costs 12 cedis, up from 8 cedis in January.
January, 8 cedis, but 12 cedis. Bibia Kosoro.
What about exercise books?
Exercise book. Now, before, now single, bako, we bako. Now, without cover, 1 CD 20 pesos. Says here, 2 CD 50 pesos.
With respect to the current economic challenges, he indicated that non-existing incentives for the industry and high import and taxes on bulk printing is killing the industry.
Name taxes are Toto and Niaman Swa, and my paper bono, Kosoro. It's because of dollar.
Taxes on the importations of these papers are huge, and the importers are also extorting money from us, indicating that the dollar is not stable, so they predict the forex rate for us. Though I am a bookseller, the schools forbid me from giving some of the books to my children, even though I would have liked to.
Now, how about book we say the call cash 10 cities. Obi ko 4 cash the call wale or be call 15. Wale in the back of 20 cities. And no. Or how no I'm
Kwame Appiagyei, the chairman of the association, claimed that the government has failed to factor the association's view in its policy interventions.
It's affecting us heavily and it's going to worsen our plight. It's going to worsen the situation. If they are going to implement this tariff, it's going to worsen everything. It's so serious. Because this bigger machine, if you buy 200 cedis worth of power, within a week, up a gun.
He further called on the Ministry of Education and other stakeholders to support and revive the industry. He entreated government to take a second look at bookbinding.
We are now calling the government to come into our aid, especially the 1D, 1F. In Ghana here, if you say factory, you think factory is a big building. But here is a factory, what? Because what we are producing. So we need incentive. We don't need the structure because we have the structure already. So I close this shop and pull out these young guys. What are they going to be? Some of them will enter into a situation that maybe I'll be comfortable. Not these guys alone. We have casual. I mean, when the school vacates, the senior high, the junior highs, we employ them and give them something to support their parents.
And no business is spared during these times of economic hardship. That was a report from my colleague James Ishan. Well, let's switch topics, talk about tech with one of the best pundits in the industry, Henry Kobler, lead for Eyes of Africa. Hey, good afternoon to you. And we're going to begin with African fintech Flutterwave, which appears to be making waves lately. The latest is that it is preparing for an IPO on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. Wow, that's a big one. What do we know so far?
Thank you very much. So generally, I think that Flutterwave has shown in terms of its platform that they sort of are giving the right solutions when it comes down to the fintech industry. I mean, they've led a lot of the innovations that are sort of reflecting in quite a number of payments that is going on site and off site as well. So I think that definitely them looking at going for an IPO basically is also stemming in from the ability to be raising quite a good funding and to be also transcending to different African countries. But I think that the most important thing we should be looking at is the solution right? Is the solution getting some good traction? If it is, then I think that them working into an IPO definitely gives them that leverage to be able to get more into providing the solutions that will come in. I mean, generally, it really wouldn't be about the money, or just for the fun of it, but it's also more important about how they're sort of taking up the fintech mantle up here in Africa. I think that we should be looking at them in terms of how they could also just push better off. I mean, just same as like PayPal and other payment platforms that are sort of running around, and how they could definitely help the minor integrations of marketplaces and startups that are sort of springing up in Africa, and we being able to control and manage our data here in Africa. So I think it's actually a good move coming in from, especially when they've been able to solve part of their problems that was coming in from their culture and issues that were coming in from their CEOs' engagements, which was more of like a bad news for them. But I think that this basically raises the standard for them again, if they're able to go through.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought about is they're doing this on the back of bad news, allegations of money laundering. And so wouldn't that have an impact as they seek to raise some funds on the New York Stock Exchange?
Would sometimes shock you when it gets down to people going about some of these news. Definitely does not get to a lot of the people that are really looking out for solutions. So people that would definitely dwell on some of these negative news are people that are particular about startup culture, startup employees, startup engagements with employers and all of those things. And so you have the part of people that are really within the ecosystem talking about the bad news. But for people that are really looking at having proper transactions going through and all, and them looking at how Flutterwave could definitely look at proper expansion, I mean, Africa Continental Free Trade basically coming into the light, how they could definitely position themselves to take advantage of that setup, all basically counts for a lot of people that are looking out for business solutions. And so I think that that would definitely be in the light. I'm sure that we've seen quite a number of changes also going inside the company. And so we're only hoping for the best. I mean, one of the most important things is an African company. We don't want to promote what's not good, but we also want to make sure that we're also promoting our own solutions, homegrown solutions that can definitely help businesses down here and sustain the data and all those that it comes with here.
And like you point out, it's an African company, so we're excited about it. When I saw this storyline, I quickly checked out Jumia and how it was faring. It's been pretty shaky for them at the beginning of this month, but the last couple of years, we're excited to hear that Jumia was going to list on the New York Stock Exchange. What lessons can Flutterwave learn from Jumia's experience?
So I think that I would not really look at how Jumia really is looking at us against Flutterwave, because for me, one of the things I've really believed in is that payment precedes everything, really. So if you're looking at Jumia stock, I mean, they've just quite been down over almost by like 38%. Not really encouraging, but I think that basically Jumia went in at a time where there's been a lot of fuss about getting an IPO, especially when you're bringing up a tech company. And so that shouldn't. I think that the lesson that Flutterwave could definitely look at is not to really fancy how IPOs basically affect companies and how big it makes you look like and all of that, but relatively looking at the solutions.
Okay.
E-commerce is difficult. Payments really is something that it happens almost every day. For people to jump on e-commerce platforms and be transacting on e-commerce platform, the trust levels alone, the logistics that gets into it, it's quite a bit of work. So I think that Flutterwave definitely could get a bit ahead of Jumia if they're able to put things right. But I think that there are quite a number of lessons they could also set up look at from there.
Let's head back home and do this quickly. Let's talk about the launch of an After Hub by government. The communications minister earlier this week intended to help stem digital payment fraud. How does that work?
So when I saw the news, I wanted to get more information. Again, it comes out to the point where I keep saying that stakeholder engagement is really important, because I don't know how many stakeholders who are within the ecosystem or even the startup ecosystems relatively got to understand what exactly is being built. When you talk about fraud comes in several ways. I mean, different ways. If you're looking at it as a platform that is going to be regulatory and also tackling fraud, yes, that's a good step in the right direction. But how many people are going to point out to that you're talking about integrating freely on these platforms. What kind of APIs are available? How safe are these APIs themselves? I mean, I feel that there's supposed to be a lot more stakeholder engagements that is going to help, I mean, all these people that are building. I like the trend where Bank of Ghana basically releases a sandbox to say, try it even before you walk into our offices. And so then you basically have everybody right from the ground coming in attachment to it. You just don't build a system in isolation and then get people to sort of say, connect to it, let's try and make it this work. But I think that's actually a good step in the right direction. There's supposed to be a lot of stakeholder engagement, get people to sort of understand what is being built, because the whole after thing now turns out to be sometimes a title rather than more of an implementation platform for us.
Okay, we hear you. More stakeholder engagement. Thanks so much, Henry Kobler, lead for Eyes of Africa, joining us for Let's Talk Tech. And that's the marketplace. Thanks for watching, everyone. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. You get the day's latest from over there. My name is Daryl Kwawu. Thanks for watching. We will be back same time tomorrow.